There is a quiet almost no one in your life will let you name. Not the friends who would interpret it as depression. Not the family who would tell you to be more grateful. Not the wellness books which assume the dimming of beauty is a deficiency of mindfulness. Not the therapists who would file it under emerging anhedonia. None of these readings match the texture of what you are actually experiencing. You stood at 28 at the edge of a sunset that broke something open inside you that you did not know could be opened, and you stayed there until the last light went, and you walked home different than you arrived, and you remember the difference, and you have been carrying the memory of that opening as evidence of what you were capable of feeling for the entire decade since. You sat at 37 with a piece of music you had loved since you were 16, and you waited for the music to do what it had always done, and the music did not do it, and the music was still beautiful, and you could hear that the music was beautiful, but the thing inside you that used to open when the music played did not, this time, open, and you sat with the not opening for the rest of the song, and you did not tell anyone. You walked at 46 through the kind of morning light you had loved since childhood, the slow golden hour, the soft amber across the windowsill, the quality of light that used to stop you in your tracks at the start of every day, and you walked through it, and you noticed it, and you registered that it was beautiful, and the registering happened only with the conscious mind. And the older part of you that used to feel the light pass through your chest as a slow private reverence did not feel it pass through this time, and you kept walking. You are not depressed. You are not ungrateful. You are not, in any clinical sense, anhedonic. You are simply carrying a quiet that the surrounding culture has never given you permission to name. Carl Jung studied this exact quiet for 40 years. He came to believe by the late period of his clinical work that the slow dimming of surface beauty in adult life was one of the most misread emotional events of midlife and one of the most developmentally important. He wrote about it in private letters more than in his published work because he knew the observation was uncomfortable. Most psychology of his era and most psychology of ours treated the dimming as failure, as deficiency, as a problem to be fixed by gratitude practices or by clinical intervention. Jung disagreed. He thought the dimming was something else. He thought the dimming was the surface aperture of beauty, narrowing precisely because a deeper register of beauty was being prepared, and the deeper register could not arrive while the surface aperture was still wide open. The dimming, in other words, was a structural transition. It was not the death of feeling. It was the slow reorganization of the nervous system to receive a different kind of feeling than the first half of life had been built for. The beautiful things have not stopped being beautiful. Your aperture has changed shape. The new shape cannot yet receive what the old shape received. The new shape is preparing to receive something else. This video is about what Jung actually saw. By the end you will know the three forms the dimming takes. You will know what the new register of beauty is and why it is rarely visible during the dimming itself. You will know the body signs that mark the transition. You will know why gratitude practices, while sometimes useful, almost never resolve the dimming on their own. You will know the cost of forcing the old kind of feeling. And there is a cost, and Jung was honest about it in ways most modern writing on emotional numbness refuses to be. And you will know the strange quieter register of beauty that arrives when you finally let the surface dimming complete its work. If you have walked recently through something beautiful and registered the beauty without being moved by it, this is the conversation Jung would want you to find. Let's start with what he actually saw. In Jung's clinical practice, he kept detailed notes on his midlife patients' reports of inner life. By the late 1930s, he had begun to notice a pattern that contradicted almost every psychology of emotion in his era. The pattern was this. Patients in midlife, usually between 35 and 50, were arriving in his consulting room describing a complaint they could not articulate properly. They said the things they used to love were no longer reaching them. They said the music, the landscapes, the small daily beauties had not stopped being beautiful, but the part of them that used to open in response was no longer opening. They were not depressed in the standard sense. They were not anhedonic in the clinical sense. They could still feel things. They could still feel grief, anger, joy at unexpected moments. What had specifically dimmed was the response to the surface beauty that the first half of life had organized itself around. The patients were ashamed. They had been told by their culture that gratitude was the cure for the dimming. They had tried gratitude. Gratitude did not work. They had been told to slow down, to be more present. They had slowed down. The slowing did not work. They had been told they were probably depressed. They had been to doctors. The doctors had found in many cases no clinical signs. The dimming persisted regardless of intervention. Jung listened. He took detailed notes, and he came by the late 1940s to a conclusion that he wrote about with unusual personal directness in his late letters. He came to believe that what the patients were describing was not pathology. It was a structural transition in the emotional aperture of the adult self. The first half of life builds an emotional system tuned to receive surface beauty. The immediacy of a sunset, the lift of music, the openness of being struck by something for the first time. The system runs on novelty and on the relatively undifferentiated wide-open responsiveness of an early life nervous system. This system is real and good. It does the work of forming the early self. But the emotional aperture in the second half of life narrows. It does not narrow to less feeling. It narrows to differently tuned feeling. The dimming of the surface aperture is the side effect of a deeper aperture forming. The deeper aperture is slower. It requires more time, more attention, more contact with the beautiful thing before it begins to respond. It does not respond at all to the kinds of stimuli that lit up the first aperture instantly. But when it does respond, and this can take years to develop fully, responds to dimensions of beauty the first aperture could not reach. The dimming, in other words, is the cost of the new aperture forming. You are not losing the ability to feel beauty. You are losing the ability to feel a specific kind of beauty in a specific kind of way. The losing is the precondition for what comes next. With that observation in place, here are the three forms. The first form is aesthetic dimming. This is the dimming of response to art, music, and visual beauty. The painting that used to stop you. The piece of music that used to break you open. The novel that used to leave you altered. The dimming is not a refusal to engage. You can still listen, look, read. The response, however, has gone quiet. The quietness is structural, not voluntary. The body sign for aesthetic dimming is a small inward turning when you encounter what used to move you, accompanied by the recognition that the inward turning is not producing the inner movement it used to produce. You register the beauty. You do not feel it pass through you. The second form is landscape dimming. This is the dimming of response to natural beauty, sunsets, mountains, oceans, the soft passage of light through ordinary days. The landscape dimming is often the most painful, because the surrounding culture tends to expect that nature is the one place beauty should always reach. When nature stops reaching, the dimming feels like proof of spiritual failure. The body sign for landscape dimming is the small breath that does not deepen the way it used to deepen when you encountered open space, the chest that does not open the way it used to open. The landscape registers. The chest does not respond. The third form is moment dimming. This is the rarest and the most subtle. It is the dimming of response to the small daily beauties that the first half of life used to take pleasure in. The first sip of coffee, the warmth of clean sheets, the brief unexpected kindness from a stranger. The moment dimming is the most diagnostic because moments do not require external grandeur to operate. Their dimming reveals that the change is in the aperture, not in the supply of beautiful things. The body sign for moment dimming is the slow registering of the moment as fact without the small upward lift in the chest that used to accompany it. The most important thing Jung wrote about the dimming of beauty is this. The dimming is never saying that beauty has died. The dimming is saying the aperture is changing shape. This is the entire distinction between dimming as pathology and dimming as developmental signal. If the dimming is generalized, if the whole emotional field has flattened, if grief, anger, love, and joy have all dimmed alongside beauty, the dimming is something else and may need clinical attention. That dimming is not what Jung was describing. The dimming Jung described is specifically the dimming of surface aesthetic response while the rest of the emotional field remains intact or, in some patients, becomes more vivid. Adults in this kind of dimming often report that grief has become deeper, that ordinary affection has become more accurate, that intuition has become more reliable, even as the surface beauty has stopped reaching them in the old way. The pattern is the diagnostic. Surface aesthetic dimming alongside deepening interior life is the signature Jung documented. What is being prepared underneath the dimming is the deeper aperture. The deeper aperture takes years to come fully online. Most adults pass through 5 to 7 years of muted surface response before the new aperture begins to operate at full strength. During those years, the surface continues to dim while the depth slowly clarifies. The clarifying is not pleasant. It is not the kind of feeling the first half of life would have recognized as feeling at all. It feels more like attention, more like patience, more like the slow accumulation of a different relationship to what is in front of you. The new aperture, when it finally comes online, does not respond to the same stimuli the old aperture did. The sunset that broke you open at 25 may continue in your 40s to register without breaking you. But a different kind of sunset, one with a specific quality of light, encountered at a specific hour, during a specific phase of inner work, may begin to do something the first aperture could never have done. The new response is rarer. It is less reliable on demand. It does not work the way the surrounding culture's aesthetic prescriptions assume beauty should work. But it goes deeper than anything the first aperture reached, and it stays longer, and it changes you more. The dimming is the price of the new aperture forming. You are paying the price now. The new aperture is what the price is buying. There is a counterintuitive observation in Jung's late notes about the dimming. He observed that gratitude practices, while sometimes useful for other things, did not cure the dimming. He observed that mindfulness exercises did not cure it. He observed that retreats to nature did not cure it. The reason, he wrote, is that all of these practices are aimed at the old aperture. They assume that the dimming is a deficit in the aperture's ability to receive the stimuli it used to receive, and they try to repair the deficit by redoubling the input. The deficit is not the problem. The aperture is changing shape. Redoubling the input cannot reshape an aperture in the wrong direction. What does help, Jung observed, is what he called honoring the dimming. Honoring means acknowledging that the dimming is occurring, that it is structural, and that the response is to slow down rather than to redouble. Slow down with the beautiful thing. Spend longer with it. Stop expecting the immediate response. Allow the new aperture to begin its slow work without demanding the old response. Practical things that honor the dimming, drawn from his patient notes. Spend long unhurried time with one piece of art rather than quick visits to many. Choose one piece of music and listen to it across an entire month rather than rotating through novelty. Stop comparing the current response to the response you remember having at 25. Allow the time the deeper aperture needs. The deeper aperture has its own timeline, and the timeline is rarely under conscious control. The honoring is not pleasant in the way the first half of life expected pleasure. It is quieter, more patient, more spacious. It is the second half of life's relationship with beauty beginning to form. There are 4 body signs that mark the dimming of surface beauty in adults. They are subtle. They run beneath conscious noticing for most people. Once recognized, they become diagnostic. The first body sign is the small breath that does not deepen at moments of encountered beauty. The breath in the first aperture deepened automatically, at the sunset, at the music, at the open landscape. The breath in the dimming registers the beauty and does not deepen. The second body sign is the inward turning of attention away from the surface and towards something interior the conscious mind cannot yet name. You are watching the sunset. The attention drifts off the sunset. The drifting is not distraction. It is the new aperture turning toward whatever it is preparing for. The third body sign is the unexpected tear at a perfectly ordinary moment, often hours or days after an encounter with beauty that did not seem at the time to move you. The tear is delayed. The tear is not for the obvious beautiful thing. The tear arrives in connection with something quieter. The new aperture has begun to register without your knowing. The fourth body sign is the slow, patient willingness to spend more time with smaller things. Not the dramatic vista, the corner of one tree, the angle of one window, the single steady candle on a dark table. The willingness is the new aperture beginning to operate. It rewards duration rather than novelty. If you can let the willingness arrive, you are already inhabiting the new register before you have language for it. There is a real cost to forcing the old kind of feeling during the dimming. The first cost is exhaustion. Trying to manufacture the old response through gratitude, through novelty, through retreats, through louder stimuli, exhausts the nervous system. The nervous system is undergoing a structural transition. Demanding that it perform the old responses during the transition slows the transition and produces fatigue. The second cost is shame. When the manufactured response fails, the conscious mind concludes that you are spiritually deficient. The conclusion is wrong. The response is not failing because of deficiency. The response is changing because of development. But the misreading produces years of unnecessary self-criticism. The third cost is across decades. The deeper aperture that the dimming is preparing takes years to fully come online. Adults who honor the dimming arrive in their 50s at a relationship with beauty that the first half of life never imagined possible. Quieter, more precise, more durable, more transformative. Adults who fight the dimming often find in their 60s that the deeper aperture never fully formed because the fighting blocked the slow work the aperture needed years to do. There is one more piece worth naming before the close. The new aperture, when it begins to come online, does not feel like the old aperture amplified. It feels like a different organ entirely. The first half of life's aperture was bright and fast and outward. Beauty arrived as an immediate inner lift, a quick opening, a recognizable cascade of feeling that the conscious mind could name as awe or joy or wonder almost in the moment of arrival. The new aperture is slower and more inward. Beauty, when it reaches the new aperture, arrives not as a cascade but as a slow, steady warming across the chest. There is often no immediate feeling at all. There is instead a quiet attention that gathers and stays. The beautiful thing seems to occupy a larger part of the present moment than its surface should warrant. Time slows. The body settles. There is no clear feeling to name. There is only the recognition that something is happening in a register the conscious mind does not have words for. Hours or days later, the encounter returns. You find yourself thinking about the small detail of the morning light from yesterday, the precise quality of one note in a piece of music, the shape of one corner of a building. The return is the new aperture finishing its slow processing. The processing produces eventually a kind of integration the old aperture's immediate lift never produced. The beautiful thing has become part of the inner architecture, has informed the way you walk through the next week, has changed the texture of your attention in some small permanent way. This is, Jung wrote in a late letter, why the second half of life's relationship with beauty is so often described by older adults as both quieter and more profound than the first halves. The descriptions sound contradictory to the surrounding culture, which assumes feeling and depth correlate with intensity. They do not in the new aperture. Depth correlates with duration and integration. The new aperture is built for both. If you have caught yourself recently being unmoved in the moment by something beautiful, and then days later, finding the beautiful thing has quietly informed how you are walking through your week, you are not failing to feel. The new aperture is doing its work. Stay with the work. Before you close this video, one small thing. What is the one beautiful thing that no longer reaches you the way it used to? You do not have to defend the dimming. You do not have to explain it. Just name what is no longer reaching you in one word in the comments below. Sunset, music, food, ocean, dancing, books, anything. One word is enough. The next person who finds this video will read your word and know they are not alone in carrying the same dimming around the same kind of beauty. You do not have to fix the dimming. You do not have to feel ashamed of it. Just name what has gone quiet for you. And if you have recognized yourself fully in this video, if the language has matched something already happening inside you that you did not yet have words for, you can add *77 next to your word. In the symbolic language Jung worked with throughout his life, 777 marks the moment a person stops reading the dimming as failure and begins to recognize it as the new aperture beginning to form. The mark is private. It is not an opinion. It is just a small confirmation you leave behind, so the next person who finds this video knows they are not alone in passing through the transition. If something in this video found you the way Jung said it would, at exactly the time you needed it, subscribe and stay close. There is more of this work ahead, and you were made for every layer of it. Until next time.